Well, the transfer portal opens today, but you'd be forgiven for thinking that it might have started a few days ago or a week ago, because the last week and a half or more seems like it's been filled with players announcing that they're entering the transfer portal. There was certainly plenty of those from Pitt over the weekend, so we've got a lot to recap today on the Monday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Monday. It's the Morning Pitt. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, hanging out with you this morning for a little Pitt sports talk. You know, the website Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of all their Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com talking about what's going on in the world of Pitt sports. If you're a Pitt fan, you want to talk to other Pitt fans, that's the best place to do it. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, and of course our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com is the best place to get all the Pitt video content, post-game press conferences, midweek press conferences, other interviews and highlights and all kinds of things. Plus these daily Morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday. We have our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night. Probably going to have to change the time on that one because I think the West Virginia game's on Wednesday night, right? What time does Pitt play West Virginia? Let me look at my little calendar here on my phone. 9 o'clock in Morgantown. We're going to have to move the time back. Instead of starting at 8:30, we might have to start at 8 o'clock this week. Just do a full little, 1 hour pregame show and get you ready for Pitt, West Virginia. So we'll do that on Wednesday night, but it's our live stream. We do it every week, every Wednesday night. Usually it's 8:30 to 9:30. This week it'll be 8 to 9. And you want to make sure you don't miss it because that's a lot of fun. You can join the conversation. You get a little chat screen off on the side of the screen with your comments and your questions, and we answer it. Me and Jim Hammett get together, and we take your questions, and we respond, and we talk. We have just a good conversation. It's a lot of fun, and hopefully you can be a part of it on Wednesday nights right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Now, you might say, Chris, you always talk about this, but I always forget. I always forget that you've got a live stream every Wednesday night. How am I ever going to remember? And I have a good solution for you. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Once you do that, you can turn on notifications and get an alert sent to your phone whenever we go live or we post new videos. It's very convenient. We try to help you out as much as we can. And of course, we always ask you to like these videos as well. So like this video and subscribe. And that way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So Pitt basketball team lost yesterday to Clemson. Got a lot of thoughts on that game, but it's like a backlog of things because from the last time we talked, it was Friday morning. Last Friday morning, we did the Morning Pitt mailbag. A lot of great questions. I thought a lot of fun topics to discuss. I thought it was a good video. I'm not going to lie. I thought it was pretty good. 30 minutes long of Pitt sports talk. And look, let's call it what it is. Let's tell it like it is, okay? You know as well as I do that the Steelers lost yesterday. And you know as well as I do that because the Steelers lost yesterday, and it really doesn't matter what they did, but especially because they lost, and especially because Kenny Pickett looks hurt, and especially because they lost to a 2-win team, and all those things that go into it, you know what people are going to be talking about today on the radio. And it's not going to be Addison Copeland going into the transfer portal, or Trey Anderson, or Bub Means going to the NFL, or Rodney Hammond and Gavin Bartholomew coming back. Those things aren't going to be discussed on the radio today. And that's fine. I understand that. I don't hold that against anybody. You got to go where the getting's good. You got to give the people what they want. And what the people want is Steelers talk. Except you. You're a Pitt fan. What you want is just a little bit of Pitt sports talk. And so that's what we do for you here on the Morning Pitt. We give you some Pitt sports talk where you're probably not going to get it anywhere else. So let's talk about Pitt. And like I say, so what I was starting to say there is basketball game yesterday, but today's episode really has been building since Friday. It's been building since the last Morning Pitt. It's been building since that one that we put out on Friday morning, the Morning Pitt mailbag, and all the news that's happened since then, whether it was about the coaching search, search for an offensive coordinator, or transfer portal stuff, or guys leaving, or guys coming back, the basketball game yesterday. And so by the time we get to today, by the time we get to Monday morning, it's like, holy crap, what are we going to talk about? So, I start a list of everything that's happening over the weekend. We just work through it. And we got to start with Friday. We got to start with the latest transfer portal departures from Pitt's roster. guys who are going to leave, guys who are going to come back, and how that leaves the roster moving forward. My guess is we're not going to really have time for basketball today, but we got time for that. I mean, we have a whole week to talk about transfer portal stuff, to talk about coaching stuff, and to talk about basketball. Six players, I would say, made notable moves this week that'll impact Pitt's 2024 season. I should say this weekend. 6 players on Pitt's 2023 roster made moves or didn't make moves or announced that they weren't going to make moves. And those 6 will have a significant, those 6 change the outlook of Pitt's roster for 2024. I don't want to say it will have a significant impact because, look, no disrespect to Addison Copeland and Trey Anderson, offensive lineman Trey Anderson, wide receiver Addison Copeland, but they weren't making an impact in 2024. And I say that because they really didn't make an impact in 2023. Addison Copeland never played a snap in his college career, not on offense and not on special teams. He arrived at Pitt in 2020. No, he got here in 2022. Excuse me. I did not play a snap over the last, 2 seasons. So it's hard to sit back and say, boy, that really is a loss from the wide receiver room. I think Addison Copeland was a talented guy. I think he had injury issues. I thought he was good coming out of high school, but sometimes it clicks and sometimes it doesn't. Now, Trey Anderson, if you recall the story with Trey Anderson, this is not Tino Sinceri's backup in 2012, the walk-on that Todd Graham brought in from Texas, who ultimately went on scholarship and stuck around for a couple of years, that quarterback, Trey Anderson, who's a good kid. They spell their names differently. This was Trey Anderson, a kid from Utah, kid who had gone on a mission trip, being raised Mormon, went on a mission trip for a couple of years, tried to stay in shape, wanted to be a tight end in college, kind of got recruited off of video of him catching passes from his friend in a parking lot or something like that. And so they brought him in, I think always knowing he was going to move to the offensive line, that he was never really going to stick at tight end. And they brought him in, and ultimately that's what he did. And he did play over the last 2 years on field goal and extra point, and that was about it. That was the extent of his contributions. I don't think he ever played any snaps on offense. And, to be honest, I can remember seeing him in spring camp and training camp, maybe getting reps with the second team, occasionally snapping or something like that. But it probably wasn't going to work out for Trey Anderson to ultimately get on the field. He was a member of the recruiting class of 2021, and now he's going to move on. So, and there was one other transfer portal addition, and that was Byron Floyd, the long snapper. He's been here for a few years. He was Pitt's starting long snapper for the last 2 seasons. I believe he recovered a fumble against Tennessee on a punt. It was one of those things where, long snappers on punt coverage seem to often be the first guy down there. You ever notice that? I guess it's because they're not covered, by a rusher or anything like that. So they pretty much snap the ball and just run straight down the field. Cal Adamitis always used to be the first guy down the field, and Byron Floyd too. And I think that's how he was able to recover that fumble. It's also how he was in position to make a tackle on the punt return against Notre Dame, and he completely whiffed. Now, it's not fair to bring up the one time he missed a tackle and it led to a punt return, but unfortunately, when you're a long snapper, the best thing that can happen is that they don't say your name. There's no reason to ever say your name unless, again, you're the first guy down there making a tackle. Either way, he was a perfectly fine long snapper. I think Byron Floyd did a good job. He was on scholarship as a long snapper. Was he as good as Cal Adamitis or Pat Quirin before him? I don't know. But, I can't sit here and evaluate long snappers. He seemed to do a perfectly fine job. Do I think they can probably find another long snapper? I imagine they can. He was on scholarship, though, and it opens another scholarship spot. And we'll talk about that in a second. Before we move on, though, I think it's interesting to look at Trey Anderson leaving, going to the transfer portal, and he's coming out of that recruiting class of 2021. And I've touched on this from time to time in the past, but that class has been an interesting one for me to track, and I've wanted to keep an eye on it because that was the class that was recruited through COVID, by which I mean they were recruited without ever being able to take official visits. So you signed a class. Pitt signed 23 guys in that recruiting class. None of them were able to take an official visit to, well, one of them was able to take an official visit to Pitt. It was Cole Mitchell, who was able to take an official visit because he took it in like June of 2021, 2 months before he enrolled. They decided to recruit him because they liked him in a prospect camp. He's still on the roster, as far as we know. But for the entirety of that class wasn't able to take visits. And I always wondered how that was going to play out, where the coaches couldn't actually be around these guys in person. These guys couldn't actually be around the coaches in person. They couldn't go see the campuses on the coaches' dime. Guys like Khalil Anderson did go visit on their own, but it wasn't really a guided tour. It wasn't, unless you're Michigan, it wasn't, with any interaction by the coaches or anything like that. And so I thought, that's a really unique recruiting circumstance. How is that going to pan out? Well, and so far, out of those 23 guys who signed with Pitt in the 2021 recruiting class, 9 have transferred or left or never made it to begin with. Anderson and Steph Hall in this year's recruiting class are the newest, or this year's team who went into the portal are the newest guys to leave Pitt's roster from that 2021 recruiting class. But you're now, 2021, 22, 23. So you've had 3 years with these guys, and out of 23, 9 of them are already gone. It seems like a lot. But what's funny is it's actually a better percentage than the year before. The 2020 recruiting class, Pitt signed 18 guys. 10 of them are already gone. 10. And that's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 have already left to the transfer portal, I should say, because I'm not going to count Daniel Morega, who came in as a junior college player and left, ran out of eligibility, or Izzy Abanikanda, who came in and obviously left early to go to the NFL. You actually take those two out, we're talking about 10 out of 16 guys transferred from that recruiting class. There's Jordan Addison, obviously, A.J. Roberts, Hunter Sellers, Emmanuel Belgrave, Jalen Barden, Michael Statham, and Sam Williams. And then this year had 3 more additions, Aiden Henningham, Buddy Mack, and Bengali Kamara. I mean, that class has completely disintegrated. There's a few guys left. There's some big guys left. Some key guys like a Dayon Hayes or a Ben Sauls who are still here. Solomon DeShields. I think a bunch of the offensive linemen. I think Branson Taylor was in that class. But you've lost a whole lot out of that 2020 recruiting class. And 2020, I mean, that's, your 5th-year seniors in 2024. Or really, I mean, guys who could potentially be looking at a 6th year or an extra year of eligibility in 24 or 25 because they were that first COVID group because their season was played during COVID. So it's interesting sometimes to look back at some of those recruiting classes, how many guys are gone, how many guys are still here. And those 2 classes have taken some hits for sure. Now, we're sort of burying the lead because a far more notable departure from Pitt's roster that was announced over the weekend is Bub Means. Bub Means is going to the NFL. And I think we talked about this. I wrote about it on Panther-Lair.com that when we talked to Bub Means a couple weeks ago, his answers were very curious. I think I talked about it here on the Morning Pitt because I think I played the clip for you and I was like, what do you make of this? What do you think he's saying here? Do you think he's saying he's coming back? Or do you think he's saying that he's leaving or that he's not sure yet and he's leaning toward leaving? What is he saying? And I said, it's highly unlikely he's going to try and go into the transfer portal. He's already transferred twice. He transferred from Tennessee to Louisiana Tech to Pitt. So it was highly unlikely he was going to do that. So does that mean this guy's thinking about going to the NFL? After a season where he caught 35 passes for 650 yards and 6 touchdowns, he's going to the NFL? And apparently, yes, he is. Now, I'll say this about Bub Means. And we're not going to be hypercritical. These guys have to make the best decisions for themselves. They have to make the decisions that they think is best. And there have been some where I understood it and some where I wasn't entirely sure they were making the best call, but they have to make the best decisions for themselves. I'll say this about Bub Means, and I've brought this up a number of times. Yes, or not 30. He didn't catch 35 for 650 and 6 touchdowns. I'm sorry. I was reading my next stat first. This season, he caught 41 passes for 721 yards and 6 touchdowns. In the last 8 games, he caught 35 for 650 and 6. And I've brought that up a lot of times because I think he really did finish the season on a high note. I think those final 8 games, he played really well and was a weapon for this team and made a lot of plays. If you take his pace over those 8 games and project it over a 12-game schedule, he catches 53 for 975 and 9 touchdowns. I mean, that's you would take that production. 9 touchdown catches, 975 yards. I mean, like, realistically saying, well, if he plays 13 games, if he plays a bowl, he's a 1,000-yard receiver. That's how he was playing over the final 8 games. He was playing like a 1,000-yard receiver over the final 8 games. And I think that's important. He wasn't always consistent, but look, whatever that Bub Means hype train we had over the summer, I mean, it finally pulled into the station in the final 8 games. So I look at Bub Means and I'm like, all right, you've got really good film from the final 8 games of this season. Pretty good film. Occasionally really good. You're also probably going to test really, really well. You're probably, if you put in the work between now and the combine or now and pro day, whichever one ends up happening for you, probably going to jump, post a great vertical, should be really fast in the 40. You'll try and master your, shuttle and 3-cone and all that stuff. I think he can do it. I think he can test really well. Broad jump, I mean, that dude should jump really far. He is a physical freak. I don't think there's any question about it. But is it going to be enough to get him drafted? I think we're realistically talking about a guy whose career production is not so high as that, that you're talking about, well, is it going to be a 4th round or a 7th round? Is it going to be a 3rd round or a 6th round? I think you're legitimately talking about, like, is he going to be drafted? And again, that's not a knock on Bub, but love Bub. How much did I talk about Bub Means this offseason and praise him and talk him up? I mean, obviously I'm not anti-Bub, but we'll see how this decision works out for him. Wish him the best. Hopefully he's able to succeed and find an opportunity at the next level. So that takes another guy off the roster. Real quick count. All right, let's bring you up to date on the numbers. 85 scholarship players this year. 11 super seniors gone. That takes it down to 74. There were initially 7 transfers, but 3 more have joined. So 10 transfers takes you down to 64. Minus Bub Means has you at 63, which means we are now in the territory of having enough room. 20 recruits in the class, 21 recruits, depending on how you count it in the 2024 recruiting class. They can fit all of those guys now. They don't need any more transfers to fit the recruits. They do need more transfers to fit any transfers they want to bring in. So keep that running tally in your head. They've got room for about 2 transfers right now, room to bring in 2 transfers. And every other guy they lose to the transfer portal will be another space that opens to bring in another transfer. So as you're looking at Pitt trying to make moves in the transfer portal, those are the numbers you need to keep in mind. Right now, 2. And probably going to be more when more guys go into the portal. Saving the best for last, 2 players who I think a lot of people assumed were going to the transfer portal are not going into the transfer portal. They are returning to Pitt. Of course, we're talking about tight end Gavin Bartholomew and running back Rodney Hammond. And it's huge. I mean, it's huge. I think it's huge to get those 2 guys back. And it's huge for a number of reasons. Number one, I think it's big for the team. Yeah, I mean, just their on-field success. I think they have a greater chance of success with Gavin Bartholomew and Rodney Hammond on the team than they have without those guys on the team. We can talk over and over about really the usage for both of those guys because a lot of it didn't make any sense. But the reality is they're both very, very good college football players, and they can help you win. If you use them, if you give them a chance. Remember my stat, Rodney Hammond, over the course of his 3 years at Pitt, when he has carried the ball 15 times or more in a game, Pitt is 8-0. It's not a perfect stat. It doesn't entirely imply correlate or causation, but it's certainly worth exploring. Now, of course, it's funny when he had 14 carries against I think it was West Virginia. I was like, well, if they just given him the ball one more time, they clearly would have won. But that's the stat. 8 games where he's carried the ball 15 times or more, and Pitt is 8-0. So maybe you should give the ball to Rodney Hammond. Maybe you should also throw it to Gavin Bartholomew. Gavin Bartholomew is a weapon. It is a weapon. And I think there was a point late in the season where people were trying to justify, well, maybe he's not that good. Maybe that's why he doesn't get the ball. No, he's really good. And he should get the ball. They should throw it to him. Period. Nothing more to say about it. Like, he should get the ball. And with a new offensive coordinator, potentially a new quarterback, or even if it's Nate Yarnell, he obviously showed a propensity for throwing to the tight ends. Gavin Bartholomew should be in position to have a big season next year. Big. And these were two guys who I think a lot of people assumed were going to go, and I don't think anyone would have faulted them for doing so. Gavin Bartholomew's usage over the last 2 years is criminal. It's coaching malpractice. And quite frankly, if he had left after last season, after the 2022 season, no one would have blamed him. Nor would they have blamed him if he left after this season, given his usage, his lack of usage, and just being generally ignored in the offensive game plans. I don't think anyone would have faulted him for going, getting a nice NIL offer, and playing it at a big Power 5 school. And I think he had opportunities to go to big Power 5 schools, plural. So, credit to whoever operates on Pitt's behalf in getting Gavin Bartholomew to come back. And I think, and Rodney Hammond as well, right? I think, Rodney Hammond probably had visions of leaving for the NFL after this season. Obviously, his season didn't play out the way he had hoped it to. His usage was, again, very curious, very questionable, and random, and at times inexplicable. And I think if Rodney Hammond had left to find a better opportunity, a place where he could get the ball on a more consistent basis, I don't think anyone would have faulted him for that. But it's a credit again to the those entities operating on Pitt's behalf. And I mean, like, let's be honest, NIL opportunities, Alliance 412, and the collective, right? I don't think that was the entirety of why those guys returned, but I think it was a factor. And people often talk about wanting to see a return on their investment. Like, if I donate to the collective, how can I see what it's doing? Well, this is what it's doing. It's getting guys to stay. Because so much of NIL, I mean, there's acquisition, going out and bringing in guys from the transfer portal, but a fair amount of it, if not a majority, is retention. Keeping guys from going to the portal. And I think that's what you saw with Bartholomew and Hammond. I think it's those retention efforts from Alliance 412 with support from Pitt fans that ends up having, number 86 and number 6 back in a Pitt uniform again. And I mean, again, it's not just that. That's not the entirety of it. I think Gavin Bartholomew really likes being at Pitt. I think Rodney Hammond really likes being at Pitt. I think it matters to those guys, and they enjoy being here and they want to be here. But that's part of it too. You know what I mean? That other thing is part of it. And so, when you talk about wanting to see the return or wanting to see what it does or knowing where the money, I mean, like, this is what it does. This is the return, is these guys making their return. And I think it's huge. I think it's big for Pitt. I think, as you look, and I think we'll see more and more guys, Bub Means, there was a certain point that I reached maybe on Friday, and I put this on the message board on Panther-Lair.com, where, most of the prominent players on offense, it looked like they were going to come back. And really, Bub Means was the one question mark in my head. And he's decided to go, but I think they're going to bring back just about everybody else of the prominent contributors on offense. Which, if they do that, I think they've got a chance to have a pretty good offensive roster. I really do. They got to get the coordinator right and see if they want to top it off with a quarterback out of the portal. But I think they've got a chance to have a pretty decent offensive roster. So that's all the movement, the player movement, comings and goings, transfers and whatnot from the weekend. We'll get into basketball this week. We'll talk more about transfers this week. If there's an offensive coordinator hire this week, and there should be this week, then we'll talk about that as well. We got a lot to cover this week on the Morning Pit. It's going to be a fun one. Recruiting stuff, transfer stuff, coaching stuff, basketball stuff. It's all over the place, and we'll cover it all right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Of course, don't forget the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. Found it all, Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. And we will be back again with more of it tomorrow. Another Morning Pit tomorrow. Tentatively planning to talk more about transfer stuff and some basketball stuff, but we'll see. We'll follow the news. Wherever the news comes out, we will talk about it right here on the Morning Pit. So thanks for tuning in today. I hope you had a great weekend despite the results from the basketball team yesterday. But I hope you had a good weekend. Hope you enjoy your Monday, and we'll be back to talk to you tomorrow morning on the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.